In this video, I'm going to show you what hardly anyone shares for free, how to plan, organize, and execute a full professional order, step by step, just like in those expensive pastry courses. I'll walk you through how I prepare a two-tier cake, cupcakes, macarons, jams, creams, ganaches, meringues, and all the essential components for a spectacular dessert table. But most importantly, I'll teach you how to stay organized so everything is ready on time, without stress, and with flawless results. This isn't just another recipe. It's a complete behind-the-scenes look at how to manage a big order professionally, for an important event. And I'm giving it all away for free, because I know how hard it is to find this kind of content without paying for an expensive course. So whether you're just starting out or already taking custom orders, this video will be incredibly helpful in showing you exactly how a full, well-executed order is done, from beginning to end. Day 1, we start with the sponge cakes. Today we begin with the base of our cake, the sponge cakes. For this recipe I will prepare two mixtures at the same time, one with a professional mixer and the other with a common, affordable hand mixer. In each bowl I place 10 eggs, which is approximately 500 grams or 17.6 ounces, and 300 grams of sugar, about 1.5 cups. At this point I activate a timer, because I want to help you visualize the exact beating time. We beat for 9 minutes with both mixers at the same time. You'll see that in the end, the texture is practically the same in both, regardless of the type of mixer. After the 9 minutes, I turn off both mixers and add 2 tablespoons of sunflower oil to each bowl. You can use any oil you prefer, as long as it has a mild flavor. I mix for 30 more seconds and then turn off both mixers. Now it's time to add the flour. I add 300 grams of all-purpose flour, about 2.5 cups, to each bowl, sifting it in 2 or 3 batches to avoid lumps and keep the mixture light. I mix with folding motions, using a wooden spoon, which helps me reach the bottom of the bowl and achieve a uniform mixture without losing the air incorporated. While I'm folding in the flour, I turn on the oven. I use a convection oven, with fan, which allows me to bake both molds at the same time. If you have a conventional oven, bake the cakes one at a time. Once I finish adding all the flour, the mixture is perfect. Look how it falls, in a ribbon-like, continuous and smooth flow. This texture is ideal, airy and light. In this recipe, we do not use baking powder. Now I move on to preparing the pans. I'm going to use 2 large pans. One square pan, 35 by 35 centimeters, about 14 by 14 inches. And one round pan, 25 centimeters in diameter, about 10 inches. First I lightly grease the pans with a bit of spray oil. You can also use a brush if you prefer. Then I place parchment paper on the bottom of the pan and grease again over the paper. This step is important to ensure the cake comes out easily. Now I divide the mixture. In the large square pan goes the batter made with the professional mixer. And in the round pan, the one made with the handheld mixer. I set the temperature to 160 to 170 degrees Celsius, about 320 to 340 degrees Fahrenheit, no higher than that. The cakes bake for 50 minutes to 1 hour, depending on your oven. Once you have the batter in the pan, smooth out the surface slightly and give the pan a few gentle taps against the table to release any air bubbles. Here's an important detail. The square pan, being larger and wider, has a thinner layer of batter. So it bakes much faster. It will be ready in about 25 to 30 minutes. So if you are baking both pans at the same time, keep a close eye on the square one because you'll need to take it out of the oven earlier. In contrast, the 25 centimeter, 10-inch, round pan, which has a thicker layer of batter, needs more time. This one will take about 50 minutes to bake completely. Once the sponge cakes are ready and baked, I carefully remove them from the molds and let them cool on wire racks. This is important so they don't get moist underneath and keep their fluffy texture. Now, I want to show you something else. I'm going to prepare the same amount of batter, but this time I'll make 2 identical bowls to bake them together in one large 35 by 35 centimeter pan, about 14 by 14 inches. Why? Because I need a large amount of sponge cake to get a thick layer that I will use to assemble the cake I'm preparing tomorrow. The idea is to make 3 more sponge layers for the filling and structure of the cake. Each bowl contains 10 eggs, 300 grams of sugar, about 1½ cups, 2 tablespoons of oil, 300 grams of flour, about 2½ cups. This sponge cake, being thicker, will take approximately 50 to 60 minutes to bake. Once the cakes are baked, I need them to have a total thickness of about 8 centimeters, about 3 inches, for my cake. Once they're cool, you can wrap them in plastic wrap if you want to store them in the fridge, or leave them uncovered in a cool place until the next day. The ideal is to let the sponge cakes rest until the next day so they're perfect when it's time to fill and assemble the cake. Now we prepare the jam and the syrup. For the jam, I place 300 grams of frozen red berries, about 10.5 ounces, half a cup of sugar, half a cup of water. I cover it with a lid and bring it to a slow boil while the fruits begin to break down. At the same time, in another saucepan, I prepare the syrup. First, I place 1 cup of sugar in the saucepan and let it caramelize until it reaches a deep golden color. Once the caramel is ready, very carefully, I add 2 cups of hot water and let it boil until the caramel completely dissolves. Meanwhile, I stir the jam to help the fruit soften and thicken slightly. When both the jam and syrup have boiled, I turn off the heat, cover them, and let them cool. I'll save them until the next day. This way, they develop more flavor and will be perfect for assembling the cake. We continue with the first day of work. Now we prepare the ganaches. I start by weighing 500 grams of white chocolate, about 17.6 ounces, and 500 grams of dark chocolate, about 17.6 ounces. In my case, I use compound chocolate, but you can use whichever type of chocolate you prefer, couverture, real chocolate, or baking chocolate. Next, I add 500 grams of dairy cream, about 2 cups, also known as heavy cream or whipping cream depending on your country, to each saucepan, and bring them to a boil. When the cream boils, I remove it from the heat and pour it directly over each bowl of chocolate. One over the white chocolate and the other over the dark chocolate. I let them sit for a few seconds so the heat starts melting the chocolate naturally. Then I add 30 grams of butter, about 2 tablespoons, to each bowl. This not only improves the flavor but also gives shine and an even creamier texture to each ganache. Now, using a hand blender, I blend each mixture well. This ensures a smooth and homogeneous texture. Once ready, I transfer each ganache to a tray, cover them with plastic wrap in direct contact with the ganache to prevent a crust from forming, and let them cool completely. You can store them outside or inside the refrigerator, depending on the room temperature, until the next day. When they're ready, I'll use the dark chocolate ganache for one of the cake layers, and the white chocolate ganache will be the perfect filling for the macarons. Now we continue with the preparation of some delicious macarons. First, I crack 4 eggs and separate the whites. I'm going to use exactly 135 grams of egg whites, about 4.8 ounces. I don't use all 4 egg whites completely, so you'll have a little left over. The measurement must be exact for the recipe to work properly. Separately, I weigh 190 grams of powdered sugar, about 1½ cups, and 190 grams of ground almonds, about 1¾ cups. I place both ingredients in a food processor. I also weigh 190 grams of granulated white sugar, about 1 cup, which I'll use to make the meringue. I blend them to make the mixture very fine and combined. Then I sift the mixture and set it aside. In the mixer bowl, I place the 135 grams of egg whites and beat for 1 minute. After that minute, I add the 190 grams of white sugar and continue beating until I get a very firm and glossy meringue. Once the meringue is ready, I add all the sifted almond and powdered sugar mixture in one go. I beat for just a few seconds, between 15 and 20 seconds, on low speed, 2 or 3. Until everything is well combined and the batter has the ribbon texture characteristic of macarons. The mixture falls in a continuous ribbon when lifting the spatula. That means it's perfect. That's how the texture should be, smooth, shiny, and just fluid enough. I prepare a large piping bag with a round tip. I use Wilton tip number 12. I place half of the mixture into the bag and set aside the other half. I begin piping the macarons onto special mats with guides, though you can also use parchment paper or a silicone mat, forming the macarons the size you prefer. With this mixture, I filled 3½ trays. While piping the macarons, I preheat the oven to 135 degrees Celsius, about 275 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that works best for me, but every oven is different. If this is your first time making them, I recommend starting with this temperature and adjusting it as needed on your next attempt. You can raise the temperature to 140 degrees Celsius 284 degrees Fahrenheit or lower it to 120 degrees Celsius 248 degrees Fahrenheit if needed depending on your oven. I use a convection oven with air, and I can bake up to 4 trays at once. If you're using a static oven, bake 1 tray at a time. Once I have each tray piped, I gently tap it against the table to eliminate any air bubbles. Important, I do not let the macarons dry. As soon as I finish piping the last tray and the oven is preheated, I place them directly in the oven. I bake at 135 degrees Celsius 275 degrees Fahrenheit for exactly 20 minutes. Afterwards, I turn off the oven and leave the macarons inside, without opening the door, for about 30 to 45 minutes, until they cool completely. Once cooled, I unmold all the macarons. They're perfect. I fill some with dark chocolate ganache, but most of them I fill with white chocolate ganache, which pairs beautifully with the soft and delicate shells. Once filled, I paint the macarons with edible gold dust, mixed with a little vodka to achieve a liquid texture ideal for brushing. Second day of work. We start with the meringues. I use 4 cups of white granulated sugar, about 800 grams or 28 ounces, and 2 cups of egg whites, about 480 milliliters or 16.2 fluid ounces, which equals approximately 15 egg whites, depending on their size. I already have a pot with boiling water ready, and in the stand mixer bowl, I add the egg whites and sugar. I stir a little before placing it over the double boiler. Since I use a large quantity of sugar and egg whites, I pasteurize everything together over the double boiler. Once it's ready, I divide the mixture into 2 bowls to beat with 2 mixers. When I see the sugar has dissolved, I take a bit of the mixture between my fingers and rub. When I no longer feel granules and it's very hot, I transfer it to the mixer bowl, in my case, into 2 bowls. At this point, I use a timer to show you the exact whipping time. I beat each bowl for about 8 minutes. I stop the mixer and add flavorings, lemon flavor in one bowl and strawberry flavor in the other. I also add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, maizena, to each bowl. I beat a little more, just until integrated, and stop the mixers. Look at this meringue, perfect, firm, shiny, such a beautiful texture. Now I prepare the piping tips, the Sultana tip, the Star tip, the 1M tip by Wilton, and 1 Russian tulip tip. I'll show you how I make the meringues with these piping tips. I use silicone mats, but you can use baking paper as well. To make the meringues with the Sultana tip, you need to hold the mat with your fingers or weigh it down so it doesn't move. If you don't hold it, when you lift the piping bag, the mat lifts up and the circle becomes deformed, elongated, and messy. It's important to hold it well so the meringue keeps a perfect shape. In the end, I fill 4 oven trays with meringues of different shapes and sizes. I make the most of the empty spaces by piping small meringues wherever there's a gap. I also show you how to make tulips with the Russian tip. You can bake these too. I pipe them 1 by 1 or 3 flowers together, which look very pretty, like a bouquet. I also add some golden candies and sprinkles for decoration, and they look very nice. I dry them in a convection oven at 90 degrees Celsius 194 degrees Fahrenheit for 90 minutes. My usual advice is to place a kitchen towel in the oven door so it stays slightly open. This allows the steam to escape and the meringues become crunchier and dry better. Once the 4 trays are baked, I store them in an airtight container or in bags. It doesn't matter if they're warm or cold, they store the same. If there's humidity in the air, don't leave them outside because they'll get sticky fast. That's why I recommend storing them in airtight containers or bags. If you don't have an airtight container, just place them in a well-sealed bag and that's it, they'll stay perfect. Next recipe on the second day of work is the French buttercream made with egg yolks. I add 2 cups of white sugar, about 400 grams or 14 ounces, and 200 milliliters, 6.8 fluid ounces, of water to a heavy-bottomed saucepan. Separately, in the mixer bowl, I add 15 egg yolks. From the 15 egg whites I used for the meringues, I use the yolks to make this delicious cream, so nothing goes to waste. That's why I make the meringues and the French buttercream on the same day. The yolks are fresh, not dry, and I don't need to store them in the fridge, making everything at room temperature. Once the syrup begins to boil, I start the mixer with the egg yolks. I also use a timer, like in almost every recipe in this tutorial, to show the exact mixing and syrup times for each step. I also place a thermometer so you can see the syrup temperature. It needs to reach between 112 degrees Celsius and 114 degrees Celsius, 233.6 degrees Fahrenheit to 237.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the syrup is thick and has reached this temperature, I slowly pour it in a thin stream into the whipping yolks. I let it beat for a few more minutes at high speed until the mixture cools slightly and the yolks with the syrup drop to about 40 degrees Celsius 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is when I begin to add 700 grams, about 25 ounces or 3 sticks, of room temperature butter, cut into cubes. Once all the butter is added, I let the mixer run at speed 6 out of 10 until the cream starts to thicken. At first, it has a liquid texture, but little by little it will transform into a thick, glossy, firm, and super delicious cream. I store the cream in a bowl covered with plastic wrap to preserve it and use it the next day to decorate the cupcakes. Finally, on the second day of work, I start by cutting the cakes. I cut the large cake made with 20 eggs, the one baked in the 35 by 35 centimeter, 13.8 by 13.8 inch mold, using a special cake cutter. I get 3 slices, each 1 centimeter, 0.4 inch, thick. I clean the top to remove the brown layer and leave it smooth. This way, I already have the layers ready to start assembling the cake. I'll give you a tip and a personal trick that works very well for me. Use a cardboard base or a flat tray to move each slice of the large cake. Instead of lifting it with your hands from the sides, which can cause it to break or bend, it's much easier and safer to slide the tray underneath the slice. That way you can lift and move it in the easiest way possible, without any risk of damage. Look how beautiful and perfect they are. Here I have 4 slices of the same thickness, all leveled evenly. I store them, and now I'm going to cut the 25 centimeter, 10 inch, round cake we made with the hand mixer. And you'll see what a perfect crumb it has. It's perfect. As if we had made it with a professional stand mixer. No difference at all. They are exactly the same. I cut 4 slices. I bring everything together and show you, 4 slices from the large cake and 4 slices from the smaller one. That's it, this step is done. Here I show you the base, which is very, very important for a multi-tiered or heavy cake. It's the most important thing. When you have to move the cake, you need to be sure the base is thick, sturdy, and secure. Here I show you the base I'm going to use. It's 40 by 50 centimeters, 15.7 by 19.7 inches, and 1.2 centimeters, 0.5 inches, thick. Now I'm going to cover each mold with plastic wrap. This is also one of my favorite methods to work with. I cover the mold and leave a bit of plastic hanging over the edge so that when the cake is filled, I can wrap it properly. This way I can store it in the fridge in the safest and most complete way for the next day. Here I'm going to crush a package of Oreo cookies, filling included. I crush them well and set them aside for now. Now I'm going to whip the cream. I use 1 liter, 34 fluid ounces, of very cold Puratos ambient whipping cream. I place it in the mixer bowl and whip until it's almost stiff. While the cream is whipping, I prepare 300 grams, 10.5 ounces, of cream cheese, like Philadelphia, and 150 milliliters, 5 fluid ounces, of sweetened condensed milk. I mix them, and once the cream is nearly stiff, I add the cheese and condensed milk mixture and continue whipping until it's very firm. I really like the texture that results from the combination of cream cheese and condensed milk. It gives a divine flavor. This is the perfect texture. Now I divide the cream I've made into 2 halves. To 1 half, I'll add the crushed Oreos, and to the other, I'll add plenty of red berry jam. I strain the jam. I don't blend it, because I want to keep the whole berries visible. Cooked this way, they're delicious. And now I have 2 fillings. The third filling will be the chocolate ganache we prepared the day before, which already has a perfect texture. Now everything is ready: syrup, jam, the 3 fillings, the sliced cake, and the molds prepared. I recommend working like this, organized, clean, and with everything ready in advance. This way, you'll work calmly, stress-free, and everything will turn out perfectly. Now I begin assembling the 2 cakes. First, I place a cake slice in each mold and add the caramel syrup we made. I add the amount of ganache, divide it between the 2 molds, and spread it evenly. I place another slice on top, brush again with syrup. Then I add the Oreo cream, which I also divide between the 2 molds. I place another slice, brush with syrup, and for this layer with red berries, I'll add 2 or 3 tablespoons of jam. I spread it out and divide the red berry cream evenly between both molds. I add a bit more jam on top. I place the final cake slice in each mold and place it upside down, so that when I invert the cake later, the bottom becomes the top layer of each tier. I brush one last time with syrup, then cover with the leftover plastic wrap from each mold. This way, the cakes are well protected, won't absorb fridge odors, won't dry out, and will stay perfectly preserved until the next day. Final work day. I begin by preparing some delicious cupcakes. Here I have ready 8 whole eggs, 220 grams, 7.75 ounces, of white sugar, 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of olive oil, 500 grams, 17.6 ounces, of sifted flour, 1 sachet of baking powder, 8 grams or about 2 teaspoons, sifted as well. I'll also use vanilla extract. I add the 8 whole eggs into the mixer bowl along with all the sugar at once. I use the paddle attachment because I don't need the mixture to be airy like a sponge cake, just well combined. I won't use the whisk attachment since I need a denser, more homogeneous batter. If you're using a hand electric mixer, you can use the regular beaters just fine. I set a timer so you can see the mixing time, which for me is 8 minutes at high speed. Then I reduce the speed to level 2 and add the milk. Next, I add the oil and continue mixing on low speed. I add a teaspoon of vanilla extract, then gradually add the sifted flour along with the baking powder, always mixing at low speed so the batter stays smooth and lump-free, without overmixing. After 10 minutes of mixing, the cupcake batter is ready. I'm going to bake several batches of large cupcakes and 2 batches of mini cupcakes. The oven is preheated to 170 degrees Celsius, 338 degrees Fahrenheit with top and bottom heat. I'll bake each batch for 20 to 25 minutes, then let them cool on racks so they don't get soggy. I place both the large and small cupcakes on cooling racks and let them rest for a couple of hours before decorating. Now I'm going to whip the white chocolate ganache until I get a firm cream. I like this texture for filling ice cream cones. I'll add 1 more cup of very cold Purato's ambient cream to this ganache and whip everything together until it's firm enough to hold its shape when decorating. When I have the cream ready, I place it in a very large piping bag fitted with a 1E nozzle. Just like that, I'll take it to the party, ready to fill the ice cream cones right before serving. I have some beautiful stands that I'll use to present the cones as if they were real ice creams. It's a fun, different, and charming idea, perfect for brightening up the dessert table, especially for the children. I'll fill them forming a swirl like a classic ice cream, and I'll decorate the top with chocolate sprinkles. A creative and delicious way to add a special touch to the party. Now we're at the final step, the decorations. Let's begin with the first cake I'm going to decorate. I'll show you a very beautiful decoration, something new and special, because it's the godmother's cake for the party. The sponge and filling I use for this cake are already explained on my channel. It's a Nutella chocolate mousse combined with a chocolate sponge with a hint of vanilla. It's a very tall cake, ideal for important celebrations. I'm going to frost it with my 2-ingredient buttercream, which also has a tutorial on my channel. I'm going to cover the cake in the simplest way possible because the final decoration doesn't need a very polished finish or advanced techniques. What's important is that the base is firm, well covered, and ready to receive all the decorative elements that will make this cake look spectacular. Once the cake is covered with the 2-ingredient buttercream, I don't store it in the fridge because I don't want the cream to harden. Here I show you some edible rice paper strips that I've cut with scissors, about 3 centimeters wide, 1.2 inches. I cut about 5 sheets. Separately, in a small cup I pour a bit of vodka. I also have various types of flowers prepared to decorate the cake. I use a bit of vodka to dip the stem of each flower before placing it on the cake. It works as a disinfectant. You can also use melted chocolate to coat the stem, but I prefer vodka because it's practical and evaporates quickly. To create this design, you can play with the proportions depending on the style you prefer. You can use mini rice paper strips and a few flowers for a more delicate and minimalist look, or as I'll show you, many flowers and few rice paper rows, which looks spectacular. I use natural flowers. You can use classic roses, carnations, daisies, or even wildflowers. Peonies also look beautiful if they are in season, and you can mix pastel tones with more vibrant flowers for a very striking visual effect. It's a very elegant and cheerful design that stands out in a party and adds a natural and fresh touch to the dessert table. Just like that, once the cake is decorated, it can be stored in the fridge until it's time to transport it to the party. That way it stays firm, fresh, and in perfect condition for its final presentation. Now there are only 2 steps left to complete this beautiful work and this lovely tutorial. First, I start with the large cake, the one that measures 35 by 35 centimeters in diameter, about 14 by 14 inches. I'm going to flip it over onto the thick base and start covering it with the first layer, using the 2-ingredient cream. The amount of cream I'll use to frost both tiers is 750 grams of butter, 1.65 pounds, with 750 grams of sweetened condensed milk, 1.65 pounds or about 26.5 ounces. The tutorial, as I mentioned earlier, is on my channel. It's a very firm cream, very good, beautiful, perfect for covering and decorating cakes. I'll apply a thin first layer, the crumb coat, and place the cake in the fridge for 15 minutes. Meanwhile, I'll do the same with the 25 centimeters cake, about 10 inches in diameter. But here I'll show you something. I'll flip it onto a base that already has a hole made for the central dowel I'll place to support the stacked cakes. I'll do the same with the 25 centimeters cake, apply the first layer of buttercream, the crumb coat, and put it in the fridge. Then I'll continue with the large cake, which will already be chilled, and apply a thicker layer of buttercream until it's nice and smooth. After that, I'll place the additional supports, some plastic straws that will serve as internal structure, plus the central dowel that will go through the middle of the cake. Once all supports and the central dowel are in place, I'll place the top tier. And here I want to show you something important. If you look closely, when I place the top tier, since it only has a thin layer of buttercream and its base is also very thin, it bends slightly and cracks. That's exactly what I mean when I insist on the need for a thick and firm base. The cream is excellent and, in principle, the cake shouldn't crack. But for everything to work perfectly, the base has to support it. It's a set. The cake structure depends as much on a good cream as on a good base. I'm going to apply the second layer of buttercream, this time a more generous layer to leave the surface very smooth and even. Once it's completely smooth, it'll be ready for the next step, the final decoration of the cake. Now I'm going to prepare a very special plaque with the baby's name, Alex, a sweet name for a lovely baby. This plaque will be the main detail of his baptism cake, so I want it to look very pretty and delicate. For this, I'll use white fondant, which I'll roll out carefully until I get an even thickness. Then I'll shape it with a special cutter and gently imprint the name Alex in the center. To highlight the name and give it an elegant finish, I'll trace it with edible gold dust diluted with a little vodka, and with a fine brush I'll paint each letter. The result will be a luminous, personalized plaque, perfect to crown this meaningful cake. A tender detail to celebrate such a special day. To continue decorating the baptism cake, I'll use some very delicate and elegant white natural flowers. As always, before placing them on the cake, I briefly dip the stems in vodka to disinfect them. To this floral decoration I'll add some edible white pearls, which bring a touch of shine and sophistication, and some macarons from the same dessert table, which I'll also use as decorative elements. To give the final touch, with a fine brush I'll add some golden brush strokes, delicate lines or soft marks, using edible gold powder diluted in vodka. This subtle and luminous detail will give a special and festive finish, perfect for a celebration as meaningful as Alex's baptism. Now I'll show you how much the cake weighed: 11 kilos and 150 grams, about 24.6 pounds. Due to its height and volume, it doesn't fit in a traditional box with a lid. So I'll show you how I prepare it for transport in a safe and practical way. I'll use a low box as the base and, since the lid cannot be used, I'll reinforce the four corners of the box with rectangular cardboard pieces cut to size. I'll staple these pieces firmly both at the bottom and top of the lid, creating a kind of frame or structure around the cake. Then, to close the whole thing and fully protect the cake, I'll wrap the entire perimeter with plastic wrap. This creates an improvised but firm box, sealed from dust, air, and any possible bumps, ideal for safely transporting such a delicate and heavy cake. And now, we've reached the last step. I'm going to decorate the cupcakes with two delicious creams I saved from the day before, a French cream and a Swiss meringue buttercream with red berries. They look beautiful, very delicate. To decorate them I used different piping nozzles. The 1M from Wilton, ideal for making rosettes and swirls. The 125 tip to form petals. And a star tip to give them an elegant finish. I decorate the large cupcakes with various designs, and the mini cupcakes I leave simply with a pretty rosette made with the 1M tip. They look charming. Once decorated, I store them all in boxes and I have everything ready to set up the dessert table with lots of love. And with this, I finish this tutorial. I truly hope you liked it, that you enjoyed watching each step, and especially that it inspired you or encouraged you to create something similar. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, I ask you to do so. Share this tutorial if you found it helpful. It took me a lot of work, making it, organizing it, recording it, and explaining every detail to help you in the clearest and simplest way possible. And if you put into practice any part of what I showed you here, I'd love to know. Tell me how it went, share your result. That brings me so much joy and encourages me to keep creating content with passion. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for sharing, and for being part of this channel. A big hug and see you in the next tutorial.